Welcome to WXYZ.com. I'm talking to Herb Boyd. He came to Detroit at the age of 4 way back in 1943, spent most of his life here before heading off and becoming a professor up in New York. He's a journalist, he's an author, he's a historian, award-winning one at that. Herb, welcome back.
And a good friend of Chuck Stokes.
And a good friend. And a good friend.
Yes.
He's written a new book. The book is called Black Detroit, A People's History of Self-Determination by Herb Boyd. Herb, you start your book in 1701, even though it came out here in 2017. Why? So many people this year have started their book 1967.
Right. I wanted a more comprehensive look at it. I don't think the book is maybe definitive, but it is comprehensive. If you're going to be comprehensive, you got to take it back to the beginnings, to the whole origins of the city itself. You know, when Cadillac, the French explorer, arrived here, put together Fort Pontchartrain and everything. One of the things about it, I have a chapter on him, and I call it the Black Prince. You know,
yeah,
so wait a minute,
how
Cadillac?
did you come up with that?
What is that? And you know, sometimes doing your research, you know, I thought I had Detroit's history down pat because I had studied with people like Norman McRae and Ed Simpkins and Richard Simpson, all those individuals at Wayne State University. Scholars. So I thought I had it pretty cold, you dig? But you start doing the research, Chuck, I overturned all kind of gems, you know? I mean, you discover, it's a self-discovery too, in terms of my own history, my family's history and everything, kind of like a memoir in a sense, but I wanted this historical spectrum. I wanted this reach, you know, all the way back to the 18th century. So that's where you begin. And then I move episodically, you know, almost every 10 years, you have a major episode in this city's history in which African-American people are pivotal. 1833, you have what you call the Blackburn Affair. It's really the first riot that occurs in the city of Detroit around these here runaway fugitive slaves and everything. Eventually, they kind of skedaddle across that river over there into Canada.
And because people sometimes forget that we were a key part of that Underground Railroad.
There you go.
Second you leave here and go across the river, you were in freedom land.
Exactly. The abolitionist movement, and I discuss such individuals as William Lambert and George D. Baptiste and William Webb and Madison Lightfoot. All of these here, these pioneering abolitionists right here. Again, Chuck, like you know, a lot of people don't know, slavery was right here in the city of Detroit, as it was in New York, you know.
You and your family came here, as so many others did, as part of that great migration.
Exactly.
The jobs were here. It was a way of escaping some of the repression that was well known and well documented in the South, even though a lot of people got here and realized that it wasn't exactly...
Go a little bit further, do a little bit better.
Yeah. They had their issues here. But you wrote one thing in your book that puts things in perspective. You said in 1910, 6,000 African Americans were here. That was the population.
Yes.
By 1929, it was 120,000. And then it kept growing and kept growing there.
That was Henry Ford when he made that $5 a day offer. And it was put in the Chicago Defender, I think, and a few other black newspapers. Anyway, the word reached all the way down to Mississippi, to Georgia, to Alabama. And black people who already had the menace, the demons of the Ku Klux Klan and the kind of resistance with the soil, with the boll weevil, to say nothing of the Jim Crow system. So they were trying to get out of this oppression and everything. So when they heard this offer, you know, they dropped their hoe, and they didn't kill a mule, as some people say, but they were, I'm out of here and get the first thing smoking. My mother came in the second migration. We're talking about the first migration, when that kind of like increased population, you know, like boom, you know, it's tripling the population, doubling, quadrupling the population. So that creates some problems in terms of the social welfare agency. The whole National Urban League, the model for that was right here in Detroit. And you can see what I'm doing in this book is show the importance of Detroit in world history, national history, no matter what you talk about. Look at the arsenal of democracy during World War II. Detroit was like the epicenter of that, you know, in terms of the whole war machine.
On the cover of your book, it says Detroit has become a code for urban failure, which is to say black failure. But then you go along in your book and you you basically explode that and say that the history of this city and the history of African Americans in this city is much deeper, much richer than that, and they've greatly contributed to what Detroit has come, even with its highs and lows.
No doubt about it, Chuck. One of the things, kind of the watchwords, you talk to most people, don't know the history. The first things out of their mouth, you say Detroit, like, is Motown. Of course, Berry Gordy, we cannot ignore his genius and his contribution, the whole soundtrack, you know, of the 1960s.
Absolutely.
But the next thing, of course, is the making of the automobile industry. So right away, I say, it's a little bit more than Motown and automobiles. We began to talk about it from a political standpoint, and I guess we made reference to the abolitionist movement, and you can push that all the way down to look at 1963 when they had to walk to freedom, right?
And the union movement.
And you can't ignore the union movement, the role of black workers in the rank and file. I worked at Dodge, Maine. Before I went to Wayne State University, I was at Dodge, Maine. Of course, with Malcolm's assassination, you know, it kind of turned my life around. I headed to Wayne State University. When you get to Wayne State University, it was a hotbed of political activism in the 1960s. All of the major black nationalist and revolutionary movements that occurred in the 1960s almost germinated right at Wayne State University. The Shrine of the Black Madonna, the Republic of New Africa, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and on and on. When Robert Williams came to campus, you know, when we had James Foreman on campus, Harry Haywood, all of these individuals found a warm embrace, you know, at Wayne State University. And that's where you talk about Reverend Peake earlier. He was there when we started the Association of Black Students, because the '67 rebellion is important, because we had some leverage then to put some pressure on Wayne State University to bring about change there. Increased number of black students on campus, the whole curriculum that was not designed in terms of black studies, we created that. So it was a number of revolutionary changes that went on in the community as a result of the '67 rebellion.
Talk a little bit about Ron Lockett, good friend, executive director of the Northwest Activities Center in Detroit, wrote the afterword here. And Ron kind of put a lot of things in perspective after you gave all of this wonderful history about how this city became what it is. But to be able to say, even though we have development in downtown and midtown, and now development starting in the neighborhoods, but there's still a tremendous number of people that don't feel a part of this equation, no matter how much is going on here.
Exactly.
And even with the economic development, you know, we see the new arena going up in Detroit, trying to make sure that everybody is a part of this whole process. How important is that as we look forward to make sure that neighborhoods are a part of this, and that African Americans and other people of color are a part of this whole process, so that we don't see a '67 come again?
Oh my goodness. That's a huge undertaking, but I can see elements of that taking place now in terms of, it makes me an optimist, but I'm a cockeyed optimist anyway.
That's good. It's good to be an optimist.
Right. One of the things about it, you talk about Mr. Lockett, Ron Lockett, writing the afterword, and of course the foreword to the book was written by Reverend Joanne Watson.
That's right.
Okay, Reverend Dr. Joanne Watson.
Yes, that's
so
right.
I have these kind of the bookends, you might say, of the book.
Yes,
and
good,
these are
good
individuals
bookends,
who are connected to this community, have been here all of their lives, and they understand it as well as anyone. So Ron was my student at Wayne State University, and it's just remarkable to see the kind of progress that he's made. Because where he is at the Northwest Activities Center, I was telling some individuals about it. He said, "Well, that used to be the old Jewish center out there." And I said, "Well, I used to drive by there when I was being bused to Edgar Allan Guest School back in the early 50s, you know, because we moved out to 8 Mile Road from on Cardoni and everything, and lived out on Pinehurst. See that wall that's on Burwood? Was built there in the 1940s to separate the communities and everything. So when we got out there, we were the second black family to move on Pinehurst. So the school, I was bused to Edgar Guest School, and we would drive past, the old Jewish center. So it's all like a going home thing that we're going to have the, you know, third Thursday, on July the 20th. I don't know when this show is going to air. We may not catch that. But we are going to have Rochelle Riley there in conversation with me.
Right.
And she did, the remarkable article that she did in the Free Press on it.
Talented writer.
But she's got a book coming out, The
journalist.
Burden, so I look forward to that.
I do too.
You dig it. So it's going to be a very interesting process, and the whole development. I'm very positive about what I see happening, certainly here in downtown Detroit. It's got to push out. I guess pushed out to Midtown to some degree, but until it reaches out into the suburbs and out to the far reaches of this 138 square miles, it's not going to have any real meaning for kind of like the ordinary black Detroiters, or any Detroiters for that matter.
And that's
who live out
that's
there.
the challenge.
That's the challenge.
To make sure that everybody is included. I know a lot of people are working very, very hard on that. A lot of people. Brighter thinkers than me are working on it, and so I think it's going to happen, but it is a process. It won't happen by magic.
It won't happen overnight, but you can see the sprigs of it. You can see elements, aspects of it developing. As I move around this community, I see what they're holding out on Shane, for example. I was driving up Shane where the old Apex used to be. Yeah. Well, of course, it's destroyed, but nearby you have the whole tomato thing, these farmers, so the urban farming.
Yes.
So that's the potential is there, in terms of growth and development.
Quick final question.
Sure.
Your mother, Catherine Brown.
Oh my goodness! You discovered her, right?
Yeah, I discovered her. You write about her in the book.
Right.
She still lives here, lives in Highland Park.
Yes.
I got the impression that this book is almost dedicated to her.
It is dedicated to her.
And what she taught you and the examples that you've lived by.
I would not know anything. She was 21 years old when she arrived here in the city back in 1941. And she was on a reconnaissance trip looking at the lay of the land, kind of out of Alabama. And when she discovered that this here would be the city for her, then she could bring, her children, her brother and I, from out of, Alabama and everything. So we got here just a few months before the whole 1943 riot. Boom. That was my welcome. Hello, Detroit. Welcome to the big city, fella. And no more Sandsburgs and Cockleburs. Get ready for the big city. But that was the introduction. It was kind of a very abrupt one.
Sure.
But at the same time, I'm looking at my mother. My mother, as she moved, in different parts of the city and got involved herself in just about every enterprise that went down from a labor standpoint, because she was like in the arsenal of democracy in the 1940s. She worked in the plants. She was at Packard, and when everything changed, the soldiers came back, the war's over. Many of the black women who had gotten those jobs in the factories had to go back doing other kind of work. My mother went back to being, doing a lot of domestic work, and housework out in the different suburbs and everything.
So many African-American women, that's how they made it.
Had to do that. Yeah. But, I follow her life. It's a memoir too. It's my life, it's her life. I try to weave it together. So a narrative theme in there, and I think that, close read, as you've done, Chuck, you've discovered that, Catherine Brown.
Yeah,
and they see that she's popping up almost like a Zelik, from one place to another. How she's there.
You did a wonderful tribute.
Thank you, Chuck, baby. Beautiful.
Her Boy. The book, again, is called Black Detroit, A People's History of Self-Determination by Professor Herb Boyd, and we should say, for those who don't know, that you teach at City University in the city of New York.
City College up there.
City College of New York. Thanks for coming back.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Chuck.
All right, so I play safe travels back to New York.
Oh, thank you. I'll say hello to Lori.
I will. I'll do that.
Okay.
I'll do that. I'm Chuck Stokes from theCUBE at WXYZ.com.